Greetings, friends. My name is Pavel Stelmach, and I'm glad to present for you the new episode of our daily wrap-up series. A new missile attack on Ukraine. On the night of December 19th, Russia launched at least 35 Iranian kamikaze drones from the eastern coast of the Sea of Azov. Our military shot down 30 of them, which is almost 90% effective. However, given the intensity, some of the drones reached their targets and damaged critical infrastructure. As a result, emergency power outages were introduced in Kyiv and regions of Kyiv, Sumy, Kharkiv, Poltava, Dnipro, Zaporizhia, Kropyvnytsky, Zhytomyr, Chernihiv, and Cherkasy. And without electricity, many residents lack only not light, but also the internet, mobile communication, the ability to cook food, and in some cases even heating. And I'll remind you that it is winter outside now, and according to the forecast, today it will be -5 degrees Celsius, and at night it would be -10. I would like to note that the air alarm in the capital today began at almost 3 o'clock in the morning and lasted for more than 3 hours. Explosions were heard almost all this time. For the most part, this was the work of our air defense, but there were also incomings.
There is an air defense system that tracks and detects targets. In the dark, this is not the means that can work with visual tracking. Firearms cannons. They need to see the target, so the enemy uses drones at night, like clockwork. The Russians start at 10:50 p.m. or 11 p.m. and can launch drones all night until 5 a.m. Yuri Ignat, spokesman of the Air Force Command of the Air Force of Ukraine, on the Ukrainian Teleton.
I would like to note that the night strike took place on the night of December 19th, the St. Nicolas Day in Ukraine. According to our religious beliefs, he is the saint patron of children and is the prototype of Santa Claus. Usually in the morning on this day, children in Ukraine expect gifts, according to our traditions, under the pillow. However, this year the children received night alarms, shelling, and as a result, cold apartments. Just in Kyiv, during the night attack, 23 Russian kamikaze drones were recognized. 18 were shot down by air defense forces. As a result, 3 people were injured and 9 houses were damaged in the Kyiv region. And in the capital, the road was damaged too. The windows in one of the high-rise buildings were broken. A critical infrastructure object has been hit. Now energy companies have to rebuild the infrastructure again. Let me remind you that the last massive missile strike was on Friday. That is, the Russians are now damaging our power lines and transformers every 3 days. I would like to point out that just yesterday, the energy generating company DTEK announced that it will take from 2 to 3 weeks to restore the Ukrainian energy system after Friday's Russian strikes, provided there are no few shelling. But here is a new night and a new blow to energy.
If we talk about the condition of the power system, which was before the shelling, before the attacks starting from October, it will take years to restore, unfortunately. But I think that we will not rebuild some objects that have not been modernized. We will build new, modern, digital ones that will be much more powerful and reliable. Dmytro Sakharuk, executive director of the energy company DTEK, on the Ukrainian Teleton.
As the Prime Minister of Ukraine, Denis Shmyhal, reported, in November, losses of Ukrenergo as a result of the shelling are more than 70 billion hryvnias, which is almost $2 billion. And after the last blows, this amount will be even greater. I would like to note that according to World Bank estimates, at least $350 billion are needed to restore Ukraine. Once again, $350 billion. This is the amount currently owned by Elon Musk and Bill Gates, 2 people from the top 5 Forbes list. This is the cost of Russian aggression in money. The cost of Russian aggression in destroyed destinies and lives simply cannot be measured.
Бажаю здоров'я, шановні українці.
Russia spares no resources for the war against our people, precisely against the people, against all Ukrainians, from Minsk to Kharkiv, from Sumy to Odessa. And I am grateful to every leader, I am grateful to every nation, our partners who understand that Russia's large-scale investment in terror is already, imagine, more than 4,000 missiles. It's necessary to exceed it with even more help to the people against whom the terror is directed.
Here is just a report from 2 frontline regions in one Sunday. In Donetsk region, 3 people were killed by shelling and 4 others were injured. The head of the Donetsk Regional Military Administration, Pavlo Kyrylenko, said, 1 resident died in Torske, 2 in Bakhmut, and 4 were injured there. Since the beginning of the full-scale invasion of the Russian Federation into Ukraine, 1,268 people have been killed in Donetsk region, and 2,757 people have been injured. And it is impossible to establish the exact number of dead and wounded in Volnovakha and Mariupol due to the occupation. In another region, Kherson, the Russians shelled 69 times a day. The Russian troops were beaten with artillery, MLRS and tanks. Residential quarters of Kherson continue to be attacked. They hit an educational institution, a hotel, private and apartment buildings. This morning, they hit the state administration building for the second time in a month. And so every day our buildings, our cities and villages are simply shelled. Vladimir Putin is visiting Belarus today. It will be the first visit to Minsk since the summer of 2019. Before that, only Lukashenko went to the Kremlin. It is not known exactly what caused Putin's decision, but I have some suspicions. Also, the Minister of Defense of Russia, Sergei Shoigu, is going to Minsk too. Sergei Lavrov came to Belarus also early, so the great delegation decided to come to Belarus today. What is the reason? The Institute for the Study of War believes that Putin will try to achieve some new concessions from Belarus. The visit of the head of the Kremlin to Minsk may indicate that he is really ready to consume the attack on Ukraine in winter. However, the probability that Belarus will take an active part in the offensive is small, according to analysts of the Institute. However, the meeting between Putin and Lukashenko will help the Kremlin strengthen its information attack aimed at scaring Ukrainians with a new offensive in the north of Ukraine, in particular on Kyiv, and sharpening the West's readiness to support Ukraine.
We are considering a possible offensive from Belarus at the end of February, maybe later. We are preparing for it. We are investigating. We look at where they accumulate strength and means. We are preparing. Andriy Kovalchuk, commander of the Operations Command South, in an interview with Sky News.
Just to remind you that a week ago, on Tuesday, December 13th, the self-proclaimed president of the Republic of Belarus, Alexander Lukashenko, ordered a sudden check of the combat readiness of the troops. Most likely that military activity on the territory of Belarus is to divert part of the Ukrainian forces and means from the front to the north. But the main question remains: does Lukashenko send Belarus military troops to Ukraine? Different experts have different thoughts about it. From one side, Lukashenko is still afraid to use his troops in the battle because he is not sure of their combat capability or loyalty to the regime. But from another, Lukashenko's regime will be responsible for drawing its people into Putin's war scheme. Belarusian legislation provides severe punishment for this, up to the death penalty. We hope that Putin's insanity is not spreading among his partners, because Lukashenko not once showed his ability of political balance, especially in geopolitics. So he will not give the order to Belarusian army. Let's just continue the military abuse of Belarus by Russia, gaining access to its arsenals, airfields and army depots and barracks. It also gains access to influence its future.
Putin's arrival in Minsk raises the importance of Lukashenko, gives him a trump card. They said, "Look at my favorite security forces. I am not such a puppet. Putin himself visits me." Therefore, whether Putin wants to thank him for his loyalty or perhaps for some decisions that has already been made, including another attack.
I will remind you that in Belarus there were mass protests after the presidential elections in 2020. Then Russian special forces helped Minsk in suppression of protests. Now most of these forces are destroyed in Ukraine and stay in Russian cities for negotiations of possible protests. So if any new protests will be in Belarus, I am not sure that it will not become a revolution. And in that case, Moscow and Minsk will not be able to blame Kyiv or NATO, because it will be a consequence of their own actions. The months-long football festival called the World Cup has ended. After 36 years, Argentina again became world champions. In Ukraine, during the championship, even polls were conducted as to whether you watch the World Cup. After all, we now have much more important battles than football. By the way, this is the second championship that we hardly follow. In 2018, we didn't watch the matches because they took place in Russia. Even then, we told the whole world that it is impossible to hold a tournament in a country that blatantly seizes the territories of neighboring states. Now everyone is trying to separate from Russia, and then it was one of the best tournaments, as FIFA President Gianni Infantino said. In 2018, standing on the same stage with Putin, Infantino said, "The tournament which ends has transformed the perception that the world has about Russia." Already in 2022, the same Infantino called on Russia and Ukraine for a peace during the championship. Let me remind you that a month ago, Ukraine recaptured most of the Kherson region and Russia tried in every possible way to stop the offensive in order to regroup. As we can see, they didn't shy away from sports officials either. After that, say once again that sport is out of politics. Before the start of the tournament, Infantino presented himself as a peacemaker. However, when the Ukrainian authorities appealed to Qatar and FIFA regarding the broadcast of Volodymyr Zelensky's speech before the final match, the International Football Organization refused, allegedly because it's out of politics. But it was not there. Just listen.
Warm greetings from Ukraine to all fans of football, life and peace. I congratulate the whole planet on the World Cup final. Today, we'll witness a common victory, the celebration of human spirit. This World Cup proved time and again that different countries and nationalities can decide who is the strongest in the fair play, but not in the playing with fire, on the green playing field and not on the red battlefield. This is the dream of so many people when players compete, making everybody enjoy peace. Every father would like to take his son to a football match all over the world, and every mother would like her son to be back from war. Whenever it is, Ukraine strives for peace more than anything else. We offered peace formula to the world. Absolutely fair. We offered it because there are no champions in war. There can be no draw. So I announced the initiative to hold a global peace formula summit this winter, the summit to unite all nations of the world around the cause of global peace. Stadiums, stands get empty after the match, and after the war, cities remain empty. That's why wars must fail and peace is to become the champion, as it is here in Qatar now. The World Cup, but not the World War. It is possible. Please support Ukraine in our efforts to restore peace. Join Global Peace Formula Summit and become a champion of peace. Let's witness the final together and the end of war. Slava Ukraini and happy Qatar Day.
Even now, it is surprising that FIFA was frightened by such words of the president, because they emphasize the global importance of football. The absolute majority of people on the planet appreciate football precisely because different peoples compete for the title of the strongest during the game, but they do it in peace and according to the rules, on a green football field, not on a blood-red battlefield. These are the powerful words of President Zelensky's respect for football, for peace and for all those people on earth who value life. And it is obvious that the president's call should have sounded before the final game of the World Cup in Qatar. And I have the impression that FIFA has lost a valuable understanding of football as a game that unites peoples, rather than supporting existing divisions and confrontations in the world. After all, we can see that in this address, Zelensky simply wanted to convey one only thing: peace matters. We must all do what we can to help restore peace to those suffering from war. If you unite billions of people around the ideas of peace, wars will definitely have no chance, and wars will be lost. Actually, football is something that unites people. It is about this, about the establishment of peace and the best human qualities through sports, through competition on the playing field. At the same time, FIFA and other sport organizations are trying their best to rehabilitate Russian athletes. Nowadays, they more often compete without a flag. However, for the most part, they do not speak out against the policies of the Kremlin and Moscow.
When they tell me that Russian and Belarusian athletes are allegedly not responsible for the crimes of their countries and should be allowed to compete, I ask, and what about 184 Ukrainian athletes who will no longer participate in any competition because Russia killed them? Dmytro Kuleba, Minister of Foreign Affairs of Ukraine.
By the way, if you didn't know, most Russian athletes and officers of the armed forces. And since 2014, athletes have been performing under a neutral flag more and more often, due to numerous doping scandals. That is, there is an athlete, but the country for which he stands is not. Although, after the same 2014, the Russian military often walk around without a flag. We Ukrainians saw this in Crimea and Donbass. According to the same Putin, there were polite people, but already this year it turned out that they were Russian military. This concludes our today's video. Thank you for watching and stay tuned for our future videos. Subscribe to UATV English and goodbye.